Good afternoon and welcome to this committee of South Cambridgeshire District Council's Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cone and I am the chair of this committee. Along the top table with me to my right is Councillor Stephen Drew, my vice chair, and to my left is Ian Senior, who is the Scrutiny and Governance Advisor. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. This meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and to the use of these sound recordings for webcast and archived recordings. When addressing the meeting, speakers should not disclose any personal information of any individual, as this may infringe their rights of that individual and breach the Data Protection Act. I can confirm that the meeting is quorate, there being at least 4 members of Scrutiny and Overview Committee members here in the chamber. If at any time a member leaves the chamber, would they please make that fact known to me so that it can be recorded in the minutes. Similarly, anyone joining us online but leaving before the end of the meeting should pop something in the meeting chat so that we are aware. Lovely, and that's been sorted. So we'll move on to apologies.
We have 3 apologies from Councillors Sally Ann Hart, James Hobro and Helen Leeming.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest from any councillors? Councillor Stobart?
No sound.
Councillor Stobart, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. So there is a mention in the business plan of the South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership, of which I'm one of the directors.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that. Any other declarations of interest? Okay, so then we'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of October. Can I just check with the committee that they are a true reflection of the meeting that was held? So if we just go through those, has anyone got any comments or anything that they wanted to amend or add? Councillor Bradnam?
I think they're a good record.
A good record. Councillor Judith Rippeth? Okay, that's fine. We'll just pause slightly.
I need to go get something in my car.
Yeah, you're fine.
Just so you know.
Yeah.
I think I've literally let Sky.
There is one issue I've noticed.
Thank you. Councillor Rippeth.
Just to say that I'll abstain from the minutes because I wasn't here at the last meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note, it's just a typo. In section 6, cost of living support update, in Councillor Leeming's comment, contribution, there's in the second line it says, who had worked so hard to make network of warm hubs, not worn hubs.
Okay.
It's just an N needs to be replaced with an N. That's all.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Anything else? No? Okay. In that case, we will move on to public questions. I don't think there has been any public questions. So then on to item 5, which is the Q2 performance report, pages 11 to 56. So Who would like to start on the performance report KPIs? Councillor Ellington.
Thank you. I have to admit that it wasn't until I really got my glasses on and looked at item number key performance, the average time validated household planning applications, page 19, and I was quite staggered to find that it takes 10 weeks, or that is the target for validating. So actually, if I put an application in today, it would be well into January, beginning of February even, that my application would even be looked at properly by a planning officer, assuming that I had collected all the right bits of paper beforehand. And nowadays, I think there are a number of people who are well versed in doing this activity and should have the opportunity to be seen quicker than that. 10 weeks seems an enormous amount of time. I'd always read it as 10 days. The other point about the other items on that page is that the fact that 73% or 75%, indeed 65 is the target, and we overachieved. But I would like to know what happens to the other 35%, to be honest, which are not determined within the work time, within those 13 weeks for a major application, and the 25% who were not determined for the non-major applications. They can go on for a lot longer than the 8 weeks, and we don't get a feel of how many cases are being seen. I hate percentages because they tell you absolutely nothing. 100% of nothing is nothing. So can we have some sort of indication of how many cases we're actually looking at here and how many are being determined within the time, and some idea of how much, what happens and how long the others may take to be processed.
Thank you, Councillor Ellington. So I'll come to the Leader of the Council, Bridget Smith.
We're working now, yes. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'll defer to Stephen Kelly to talk about why the target is the target. But, you know, you need to be aware that, you know, what a busy planning authority ours is. Yeah. And they're dealing with thousands of planning applications. And therefore, I think, you know, our performance here is extremely good, and if you compare with some years ago, it is dramatically improved. And the fact that we are, you know, we are hitting our target, and we're exceeding our target, doing better than that. But you know, we are not a sleepy little district council dealing with planning applications for garages and things. I've just come from a meeting with the Secretary of State, Michael Gove, where I've been saying that though we have 140 people in our shared planning service, they are dealing with 13 big strategic sites ranging in size from 1,300 homes to 11,000 homes. So one of those is the largest strategic site in the UK since Milton Keynes. So, you know, this is, you know, the fact that we are doing so well here is a reflection of the expertise and the improvements that have been delivered by the planning service, certainly within the last 12 months. But I'll ask Stephen Kelly to give some narrative around the rationale for the target being what it is, if I may.
Stephen Kelly.
Thank you, and I will draw Heather in, but just first, your first point, Councillor Ellington, to provide some reassurance. It isn't 10 weeks to validate it. That's the total decision time that is involved. And you might remember a previous conversation at Scrutiny in which this isn't a government performance target, but one of the things that we've been trying to shift to is the lived experience of applicants in the planning process. I'm encouraged to say that the September performance, 9.62 weeks, is a performance that is better than, it was 13 weeks last year. So this relates to how long, if you're a householder, not do you get your decision in, because the indicator is within 8 weeks or a time that we agree. We moved in the planning service a year or so ago to say that doesn't relate to the lived experience of applicants, and particularly around householders. So this time last year or so, it was about 13 weeks. Now it is 9.62 in this last corner, and it's continuing to fall because we felt it was important that that indicator reflected the end-to-end experience of an applicant for a householder proposal in South Cambridgeshire. And I'm pleased to say it's coming down. I'll ask Heather Jones, who's the Deputy Director, to comment on your second point to see if we can give you an indication of the number of applications. Clearly, the major application target is a reflection of the complexity of some of these applications. They include things like 106 agreements. Every single major almost includes a Section 106 agreement. And we need the applicants to play ball with us and the county council to play ball with us around that to hit those targets. But if I can ask Heather to comment and give you some idea of numbers and also comment on the other 25%, it might be helpful because we are targeting those particularly. Thank you, Heather.
Yes.
Thank you. So just to add to that, we do deal with around 5,000 applications a year, but they can range from everything from pre-applications right the way through to the different application types. In respect of statistics where we need to respond to government, then that's generally around about 1,500 a year. So that's the kind of scale of applications that we're dealing with. I think there was a comment about what happens to the applications that are outside of those weeks that we've not determined. Generally, there will be a reason why that is. So there might be that there's consultations that we have to do, further consultation or further work that is required, and we don't get an agreement for an extension of time. So we are trying to work with our agents and our householders to ensure that we reduce that as much as possible. But I'm pleased to say that basically our historical applications, or those out of time over 26 weeks, is reducing, and we've spent a lot of time to reduce that to a number of around, I think it's around 350, something like that now. So I think that's a really positive move, so that we know that they don't sit there for many years. We do actually deal with them before they hit the kind of historical limit, which is 26 weeks. That's what we class as a kind of aged application. So hopefully that reassures you that we are targeting them, and particularly for householders, because we want to make sure that it's very, very important that we help them achieve their planning permission as soon as possible. And the last month, I think our figures are around 81% again. So that's a really positive move. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can just come back and say, I misunderstood then the validation. I'd understood that the validation was the process when you between when you receive it and when you ensure that you've got all the right bits of paper. That was the meaning in my head. So I think you've undersold yourselves.
Thank you. Well, yes, I'm sorry if the description of it refers to, you're right, validated applications, but actually because there are some applications that the applicants do submit them, and obviously they are taking longer, but we are working with agents actually, so that our the householders, the residents of South Cambridgeshire, experience the minimum time possible, and that includes trying to help those agents to put valid applications in, because that can extend the timeline.
Thanks very much. Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions to ask. If I start on page 52, that's the paper copy. I was sad to see that the Milton Country Park sort of mental health scheme for young people, the primary school aged children, couldn't go ahead this September because of lack of participants, not because there aren't a lack of people, I think, to take part. And I'm glad to see that the council's working closely with the NHS to get those people referred. I just wondered if anyone had thought about going into primary schools to find out, or finding out through primary schools leadership teams, because often the mental health issues start at a sort of earlier stage there, which is what this programme is about, picking up on kind of low-level mental health to improve, mental health problems to improve, whether primary schools have been contacted, because I think that might be a really useful place to start. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Leader of the council.
Thank you. So that scheme was specifically for teenagers.
The Milton one was younger. The one at Wandlebury is teenagers, but the Milton one is like sort of 10, 11, 12-year-olds.
12 to 17-year-olds.
Has it? Oh, sorry.
Secondary, not
Leslie, has it changed? It's obviously changed.
It's always been for older.
Okay, as I understood it, Wandlebury had the older age group and Milton Country Park had the sort of primary/secondary school age bracket.
So initially, when the scheme was set up, we looked at it was never a primary school age range, but it was 12, I think, to 14, and then split then with the 15 to 17-year-olds, so that we didn't have that 12 to 17-year age.
Okay, my question is then, can the secondary schools, like, Impington, Cottenham, the ones around the locality, be contacted, because that might be helpful?
We are in contact with all of the secondary schools, with the SEN leads and the dementia moment, but the care team for those children that are struggling.
So I think if I can interject, it's not for a lack of trying. Because I personally am very proud of this initiative, and I've spoken about it sort of far and wide. So it's really disappointing that we haven't been getting the uptake. That's not to say that if things improve, we won't respond. But if I could come back to
can I just say that actually Gareth and I met with CPFT, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Foundation Trust, just last week to see whether they have a single point of contact called United, which all GP referrals refer into. So we had a very good and positive discussion with them last week to see whether we could embed this scheme into their referral process. And that's looking likely to happen.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's a really good scheme. I'm also really proud of it too. And I know it's really good, and I'm proud that it takes place locally, some of it, but I just sort of saw that and I thought, are we missing something? Because obviously through the healthcare route is one way, but also the stage at which this scheme kind of really helps is early on. So often schools actually kind of know about that first, and that's why I was inquiring if you would consider sort of contacting secondary schools too.
Thank you. So I have been involved in recent years through the Children and Young People's partnership in early intervention mental health support for children in primary schools. Which was organised by the county council. It's a different offer. I think that's the thing. There are different issues. There's different health and safety concerns and so on. I mean, I'm not aware how much, well, I know there is work still going on because I know some of the people who are delivering it, but it is a slightly different ball game. And I think, you know, what was unique and special about this was the fact that, you know, it allowed children some levels of freedom within open spaces, which was so beneficial to them, which you possibly couldn't do with younger children, because I think, you know, possibly the safeguarding issues, but we're getting into quite a lot of detail there. Do you want to respond to that?
With the secondary age.
We have actually just had the whole scheme evaluated over the last 3 years, so that's just been published this week, which we can share with you, so you can see the full outcomes.
Yeah, that would be great. And I've got one other question. Is that okay or not? Do you want to come back to me?
No, we'll start. But just before we move on, I was just going to add about the charitable sector in that. I wonder if Catherine could just, I know you talked about the single point of contact for sort of mental health services, GPs, but does that link into the charitable sector in terms of, I don't know, I can't name it off the top of my head, but there are a number of charitable organisations that provide sort of non-statutory mental health services. STARS comes to mind, and various other ones in schools. So I just wondered how they're being linked in. I'm sure they are, but it's just how that's happening.
So there's as part, United is an umbrella organisation for the voluntary sector as well. So there are the partners signed up that include Centre 33 and Romsey Mill. So the children that come through the voluntary sector automatically get referred onto this scheme as part of that. So it is an umbrella organisation for the voluntary sector.
Thanks very much for that. Judith, come on to your second question.
On page 25, about food waste and wanting to reduce the overall household waste production. I'm really glad to see that. Recycling rates are good, and the work being done through the Love Food Hate Waste scheme especially. I just wondered, there's one thing which was really good was the food waste caddy scheme, which was piloted in Milton as one of the places, and you really did focus your mind on what you were putting in there, because you just saw, you know, the waste in the caddy, and it helped you to reduce it. And I know this is a complicated issue, but I wondered if the council had got any further with bringing that back at some point soon.
Leader of the council.
Thank you. I don't know if Henry Batchelor's there, but so the government are just they're mandating for weekly food waste collection. So this is something that we've got to respond to, and obviously I'll let Bode talk about Henry. Let Henry talk about this rather than me waffling.
Councillor Henry Batchelor. Sorry, I didn't see you online. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I was concealing myself. So as of April 2026, the legislation will come in that we will have to collect food waste separately. So that hence why we had that 3-year trial, which ended last year. Uptake of that in the areas that we trialled it in, Milton being one, Linton, my division, being another. The uptake and the right things being put into the right bins was very, very good. I think it was over 85% of people use the service correctly. So it certainly is coming in, and when it does come in, we're sort of confident that if we did collect food waste separately via the caddy scheme, that the change in behaviour of people, it wouldn't be a huge issue for that to take place. But as I think the leader alluded to, we are having sort of correspondence with DEFRA about how exactly we facilitate that change and what support they can give us as an authority. Because as a collection authority, we can pick up the stuff fine, but it's what we do with it afterwards, which generally tends to be a county council issue because they dispose of the waste. So but certainly as a collection authority, we're very confident that when the change does kick in, we'll be able to cope.
Thanks very much. Do you want to come back
now? Just April 2026 comes soon enough from that point of view, and hopefully maybe earlier. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So I actually have three questions, but they're three kind of quite discrete areas. So I'll leave it to you. But let me ask the first one, or put the first point. So I'm on page 30 of the agenda pack, and item 2A, which is the conversion of the ground floor of South Camps Hall as a kind of business incubator and encourager. And my question was, well, I've got two questions. The first is directly related to this. How's it going? And are we getting any level of inquiry? Of course, this is related to the communications plan to get the word out to local businesses that there is space. So how's it going? And are we beginning to get inquiries and interest? The second, which is kind of vaguely related, might take us in a different direction, which is in all the discussion of incubating new businesses and helping and putting feelers out and all the good things that we do in relation to business, I've never seen a mention of B corporations. Just a little context, I may be pushing on really open doors here, but B corporations, you will see the little sign on products, but it's basically a whole kind of view of business which takes into account sustainability and ethics, as opposed to simply, you know, let's draft our rules of association and make a profit. So engaging with B corporations is a good thing and really aligns with council policy. We could go on to, does it touch on procurement? But I think for the moment, you know, if a small company or somebody with an idea of a startup were to roll up to the council and say, I really need some help in setting myself up as a B corporation, I just want to start, could we actually help them? So two questions, what's happening downstairs, how's it going? And then if somebody did rock up and say, I really want to be, you know, on the path to a B corporation status, could we help? Could we, you know, answer their questions?
Thanks very much. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. The decorators were in the downstairs space only last week, so I think the paint's probably just about dry. We're still waiting for the new screens around the contact centre to go up, so it's nearly ready. And I know has been doing lots of work over quite a number of months to find out the interest, and I know there is some, but I'll let her talk about that. So on the subject of actually assisting companies who come to us, we're already doing that work. So our business support teams provide a single point of contact. They advise people about space, about greening their own business. We will now have this ability to offer them hot desking or start-up or move-on space or whatever. So that's already an offer we have. Whether we want to get into accreditation or not, I suspect possibly not I suspect possibly not, because I think that's the job of other people and not us. But, you know, I'm very encouraged that new space is looking good, but we're also talking about opening it up for community use as well, because we're aware, having met with some local leaders in Camborne very recently, that there's a shortage of community space, and we're doing our best to respond to that with our own assets. But Anne can fill in the details of the level of interest.
Councillor Stobart. Oh, sorry.
Could Anne Ainsworth just come in with a bit of detail, Councillor Stobart?
Thank you, thanks, Chair. We're hoping for the downstairs to be open as an offer to businesses, individual startups from April next year. We've been in the process, as you know, of renovating the downstairs. We're very close to ordering the furniture and the things that we need for the new layout. I think a couple of things to mention in particular. What we're looking to do there is create a business hub, an opportunity for people who maybe work on their own or working from home a lot at the moment, to have that touchdown space and to be able to connect with other people and other businesses and therefore be able to, you know, share that experience, but also perhaps not feel as isolated in their own particular roles. And we know from business support organisations that that's been a really key aspect of helping businesses grow and develop and share ideas. We're also going in that space to have opportunities for other business networks and support organisations to come and meet with people and be able to do talks, make sure that they're aware of what they can offer and the support that's available to businesses across South Cambridgeshire. So really try to make it quite a vibrant place to be, and in that sense provide that touchdown space, but also provide that opportunity for people to grow and to share those business ideas with each other as well. So hopefully it will be operational from April. In terms of interest, we have spoken with people who've said to us that this is of interest to them, this is something that they would like to do. We're aware that there are other offers across South Cambridgeshire, and this is going to be tailored slightly different to those offers. Some of those are quite expensive, very suitable if that's what you're looking for. But what we've been hearing from people is that touchdown space and that ability to meet others, for some businesses, it is the primary factor, and actually they feel that the cost of some of the other offers in the area is prohibitive to their businesses, particularly when they're starting up. So we're hoping that this will supply an offer to them that they currently can't access in other places. But also, as part of that, it will differentiate itself because we'll be bringing in those other support offers as well. We've also had some interest from other organisations. Obviously, you'll appreciate I'm not going to name them at the moment, but those are organisations that support young startups, young enterprise as well. Very, very keen to provide them with space if we can do that to support young entrepreneurs in South Cambridgeshire as well.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Could I,
Yes.
Chair, just add, first of all, thank you, a very clear explanation of what's going on downstairs. I think in relation, so citing B Corporation is just an instance, and I think I agree with the leader that, South Cambs is in the business of doing certification, but, perhaps setting people on the right track. And, it would be nice to know that if somebody comes with a concept, that officers would be able to steer just from a point of view of knowledge. So that's just perhaps to note. Now, Chair, should I go on with my second question, if that's okay? So I'm on page 38 of the agenda pack. And a bit of a change of topic here, biodiversity net gain. And I did chip in with some comments last scrutiny overview, and we had some good discussion, for example, about the interest at parish level in participating. Now, parish interactions, I think, are nicely covered, and there's a good action at the foot of the page. And I would very welcome, the notes of progress on training of planners. People are at the sharp end of having to deal with biodiversity net gain, and the pre-application service, I think, essential because it's also new and also challenging. I think not just members of the planning committee, but I think all members ought to have some be versed, at least in the language. Because some of the interactions that we're having at parish council level are intriguing. The first word that rolls off people's lips when you talk about the scheme is greenwashing. This is greenwashing. You're letting developers off the hook, and so on. And I don't think that's correct, but it's an initial reaction, and so you're promptly on the back foot talking about scale. That if this scheme works, we can create wildlife corridors. We can do big stuff in improving the natural environment, in restoring nature, which is really what we're about. So I would say, let's broaden the training objective and think about the communications as well. And, it would be nice to have some reaction perhaps from, the planning team, but also communications about really how we get the message out about how big this change is and what the implications are. And I appreciate, what's being done at parish level. I think that's very significant. But, how do we get the big picture over?
Thanks very much. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So yes, anything that's kind of new, and even though for some of us biodiversity net gain's been around for a few years now, it's still pretty new for a lot of people. And obviously we have a local plan that's being particularly ambitious. We have the combined authority responsible for leading on the local nature recovery strategy, which is that work's being done both by the county council but also by Natural Cambridgeshire, who are a local nature partnership, who incidentally have a new chair, who I met this week, who's quite an exciting person. I think he was responsible for training in all three of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. So he's somebody who can certainly get stuff done. So there's a big bit of partnership work to do on this. I think some of the work we do will be led by the local nature recovery strategy. If your recommendation is about this council doing more to sort of make sure that all members fully understand what we mean by biodiversity net gain, then I would accept that as a suggestion. May I just defer to Stephen Kelly, please, in relation to planning specifically?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the comments. Clearly, there's been a slight delay in the metric and the introduction of the obligations, but the Shared Planning Service, as you know from a report to Cabinet, I think probably early in the year, is already trying to pioneer, working with the County Council and others, a kind of robust and rigorous approach to biodiversity net gain. Because of the late publication of guidance from DEFRA, we're going through our own process of comprehension and understanding in terms of what that delivery process might look like. But absolutely our ambition, both in terms of supporting planning officers, but also training our own planners, and then offering advice to applicants is designed to help ensure that through a charged pre-app process, in fact, the support for our ecologists to be able to take that process out is a commitment that's ongoing. We have bid for funding and in fact have received funding under the new responsibilities from DEFRA for the obligations associated with managing biodiversity net gain. And for those that think it's a superficial approach, it most certainly isn't in terms of letting developers off the hook. There is a 30-year monitoring obligation on the planning authority, which we are introducing a process and programme for. The essence of your point, though, can we share that? How can we help people to understand is something that we can think about further in terms of sharing more widely, not just with members of the Planning Committee, who are our priority, obviously, because they'll be shortly having to make decisions on this, but more widely across the council, and something we can certainly take away.
Thanks very much. Did you want to come back on that, Councillor Stone?
No, to thank officers and the leader for that response. That's very good.
Thanks very much.
I've got one other thing.
Continue.
If you're fed up, I'll come back later. But,
please continue.
So I'm on page 42, and electric vehicle charging points, 5. Just wanted to note this afternoon the Combined Authority led an excellent briefing session on electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging points, and highlighted quite a number of what I think is issues you would think of in relation to electric vehicles, but not necessarily at the first go. So, for example, interacting with the Motability community, understanding the needs of people with disabilities in relation to electric vehicle charging. So there's very comprehensive coverage. Now, one of the things we did talk about was how electric vehicle facilities are working at community level, and that's a little more obscure. And I know we've had this excellent support for parish councils to install electric vehicle charging points, but I think the point coming over in the briefing and has come out in some of my discussions with parish councils is, where does it fit and what's the business aspect? How can we make this work for the village? What's good practice, and so on and so on. And then you add to this point about use by people with disabilities. Can we line something up so that with Motability supplied cars it's all going to work out, and so on and so on. Is there something more we could be doing? That's my bottom line question, to make sure that the rollout of electric vehicle charging infrastructure is done well and done appropriately. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stobart. Councillor Brian Milnes, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The electric charging vehicle programme is continuing this year, and Richard, we've just updated the additional information page on our website to include, for example, the various options that are available for parishes and community organisations to take advantage of the grants that we're offering. Because, as you say, one of the difficulties is a naivety or a general ignorance about what options are available. So, for example, parishes with their own small car parks adjoining recreation grounds and so on might want somebody to come along and provide a whole service, but, for example, then donate some of the, or donate, or by agreement, share some of the earnings that are coming out of providing that service. So there's a whole range, a continuum of options available, from doing everything yourself, organising the new electricity supply, getting the equipment and so on, right the way through to a fully managed service, which I think if parishes and community groups understand that range of options, they can better work out what's most suitable to them, so that they can go ahead and deploy charging points more widely.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Stobart.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Parish councils understanding options. Maybe we need to work with parish councils a little bit to hear what they're saying and feed that back into the process. But I think this is a good first step that the deputy leaders outlined. Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I'm on page 39 in Appendix B, and item 2, which is working with neighbour council, well, city council, water industry and stakeholders to address water scarcity. And the position at the end of quarter 2 refers to working with other authorities to understand the supply position and exploring mitigation measures. And I just wondered if it was possible to have an update on where we are with that.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, Stephen Kelly and I have come from this meeting with the Secretary of State this afternoon, where water was the thing we talked about more than anything else. So, we are, he didn't give a whole lot away, but he's absolutely aware of the problems we're facing with water here. He accepted that it is not our responsibility or within our gift to solve it, and made it perfectly clear that it was down to government to solve it. And he has this water task force who I believe are making progress on finding solutions. We're also expecting a sum of money to be allocated for reduction in water use by households. We expect that to be announced in the autumn statement, and he did say that. But he's very aware that the water crisis has actually put on hold delivery of the development within our current local plan, never mind the emerging local plan. So, and again, it was a very, very amiable, collaborative meeting, and we are expecting something positive. We're not expecting a magic wand, but we're expecting to see quite a serious level of commitment from government to helping get through this problem. Stephen, there's anything else I haven't said there which we can add?
It's just to highlight the fact that certainly through the water scarcity group work, and we're represented on that group, which is a project group led by the government. Your point around holistic solutions that look across the wider area has been understood. So alongside Cambridge Water, who are the water supplier, we also have Anglian Water the Water Resources East, Ofwat, and a number of representatives from DEFRA. And the approach has been to look at a whole basin approach, but also to understand, and indeed there is recognition of the contribution of affinity water and so forth to resolving these demand-supply challenges. So insofar as it's bound, the group has made progress so far. There's still further work to be done, but it is taking a whole system view of the water challenges facing the area and not just considering the narrow boundaries of administrative areas and so forth.
Thank you. Is that all right if I...
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The reason I ask is that you'll be aware I chair the Joint Development Control Committee, and one of the things that we're becoming increasingly aware of is that there are times when we are told in a planning application that measures, a water usage plan has been submitted as part of the application, and in a recent one, a building is proposed to have a footprint increased from an existing footprint to 4 times that footprint, and we were being told that the water usage of that building, it was going to be demolished and a new building built, which would have 4 times the floor space, and we were being told in the documentation that the water usage of that new building would be no more than the existing building, even though the floor space was 4 times the floor space of the original. So we're not in the position, we weren't saying we don't believe you, we were just saying we would very much like to be able to monitor that, so that if that transpires not to be the case, then we need to be able to control that. And what came out of that was that, of course, we as an authority have no powers to monitor. And I just wondered whether the government could be in a position to actually enable the monitoring of plans which are submitted by developers to ensure that they are complying with the water usage that they declare that they will comply with.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley. Stephen Kelly.
Thank you. Well, I suppose just to comment on that, the water industry is a complex and regulated area, such that even whilst, for example, Cambridge Water, I understand, is able to levy meters and put meters in place, and potentially can develop incentives or incentivise approaches for domestic water consumption. For commercial water consumption, water is provided through wholesalers, and there is a market in place. But the point that you make was raised at the Water Resources Group discussion yesterday in respect of how far Ofwat, for example, can consider obligations on the wholesale sector, not on the water company, but on the wholesale sector for performance improvements in terms of per capita water reductions. Clearly, at this stage, that is well beyond the scope of the District Council and Planning Authority, but I suppose, and certainly I know there has been explorations around are there planning conditions and so forth that would be appropriate. I think it's difficult to police from a local planning authority perspective, because in essence you would be declining people the right to use water, which is a human right in many respects, and certainly would present management difficulties. But Ofwat as the regulator and effectively the police force for both water companies and the wholesale sector is certainly exploring that possibility as part of the work that's going on at the moment.
Thank you. And it was really that point that, as a member of that water scarcity group, whether we can lobby government to require this wholesaling exercise to be metered in some way. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Khan.
And I wanted to bring something in on that topic, really ask. One of the issues that came up on this particular application which occurred to me as being a significant issue, and I don't know how one deals with it, is the fact that you're having a developer who's a speculator, basically building a building which is going to let out. And he may make promises which is then virtually impossible to impose upon the tenants that eventually comes. I'm wondering if there's ways of dealing with that in the planning process.
Are you happy for me to respond?
I am. We're getting quite off subject then, I think.
Yeah, so just briefly, Stephen Kelly.
I think a range of options are being considered, but I don't think it's appropriate for us as the District Council Planning Authority to get involved in that level of consideration and detail, because there are so many variables and there is an industry regulator for water.
Thank you. That's not what I suspected, but thank you for telling me that.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Councillor Stephen Drew.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. In the first instance, I'd like to ask a question which comes from page 34 at the start of Appendix B on the Business Plan Progress Report. I apologise if I sound confused in answering the question. I'm asking this question in part on behalf of my Camborne colleague, Councillor Leaming, who's unable to be here, so therefore I'm making sure that I'm channeling Councillor Leaming and asking the question correctly. In the Objective 1, it refers to the plan for the building of 75 new council homes each year, but talks about the fact that in the current year there is not expected to be 75 which will be acquired or built, and then it explains that this will be done and caught up in later years. We wonder to what extent the council is completely confident that this will be able to happen, on the grounds that one of the things that's been talked about in the last few years is that the District Council has been very successful in increasing the number of council houses that we have put into our stock, and therefore, whilst obviously very positive about having 75 per year, just slightly concerned that obviously it will be fallen behind on this year, and just wondered if we could have some more detail in terms of how we will absolutely make sure that we don't fall behind this excellent work that the District Council has undertaken in the last few years.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So that's a really helpful question. So we don't own land in this council. So, you know, acquiring or building council houses is necessarily opportunistic. And I see Councillor Batchelor has just come in. So I think actually, to be courteous, before I say anything else, I will let him come in, and then I'll chip in at the end if there's anything else I wanted to add. Councillor
Batchelor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to reassure Councillor Drew that we will be making our numbers very significantly, particularly next year. The current situation is, of course, market forces. The builders have, in general, simply slowed up the process of their builds, which has affected our programme. The other factor was that we have invested in blocks of flats recently in Northstowe, which you only take it on when the entire block is ready. So, you know, you get 24 houses or properties in one go in that sort of circumstance. So if that's pushed out, it makes it, the numbers look more dramatic, but in fact that they're not. I think another factor that you'll be interested in is, of course, you're probably aware that we're taking part in the government's programme for housing refugees. The upshot of that is that we have purchased 66 individual properties for that purpose, which is partly funded by the government. Those numbers are not in these figures at all, because you know they're not counted in that context, although the 66 will in due course become part of our stock. So, you know, the build is still going on, the contracts are there, and we will be delivering substantial numbers. Thank you.
If I could just add in, so Thank you, Councillor Batchelor. So the other way that we build council houses is on exception sites, and exception sites dried up. I haven't seen an exception site for yonks until last week's cabinet meeting when we approved an exception site, and Kirsten Donaldson assures me there are a number of others in the pipeline. So something's happened, and suddenly we're getting exception sites again, which slightly compensates for the fact that, you know, we don't have land on our own on which to build. So, you know, these things, as Councillor Batchelor has said, it goes up and down, and hopefully the overall trend will be up.
Councillor Mills, did you want to come in on this point?
Just a quickie. So I don't know whether I should be addressing Councillor Drew or Councillor Leeming being channeled by him, but there's some good news from Sawston, which is Stephen knows very well, and one of the developments in Babraham Road are going to have 47 new council-owned properties that we're taking from the developer to our own specification, as well as almshouses from John Huntington Charity. So we're going to have a good proportion of those 280 homes on the Red Rose site to the south of Abraham Road in affordable homes category and our own ownership as well as shared ownership. So that's another good scheme going forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I have 3 cabinet members answering my question, all very keen to come in. What I would say, I suppose, is I think that reflects the extent to which all of our cabinet take the provision of council housing within South Cambs as a very, very serious thing, and are very proud of the work they have done. So thank you very much, colleagues, for the answer. I now have 3 questions of my own, if that's okay, Councillor Cohn. Thank you. If we could go to page 21 of the report, please, which is Appendix A. And we have a specific table, AH215, the percentage of successful homeless preventions as a proportion of all homeless cases closed. And I note that after a period during which there had been quite a lowering of the success, still above the intervention level, we have had quite a significant improvement in the successful homeless preventions as a proportion of all homeless cases closed, going up from 49% in June to 60% for September, which is significantly above the target. I wondered if some more detail of explanation of how we have managed to achieve that could be given.
Councillor Batchelor? Still there? Yeah.
Right. Yes, I'm with you, I think. Yeah. Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, these things fluctuate quite a bit because, you know, it's all about the demand, and the demand comes in waves and so on. The truth of the matter is that we have an increase in demand, and there's pointers that say that we may have a lot more demands coming on us before long. The reason I say that is that if you look at the numbers on our waiting list for housing, that went up from 1,800 to 2,024 in the course of 1 month. That was a very unusually large number. Obviously, we haven't got the equivalent increase in the number of houses available, and that must mean that you know, more people are in need. And certainly, I was at a homelessness summit last week, where other councils are in deep trouble, particularly coastal ones. Margate, for instance, is actually paying out 1/3 of its total budget simply in supporting homeless people. So, you know, there is a big issue around. The prevention side of things, I mean, we take very seriously, and you know, obviously it's the sensible way to go, is to find people alternative routes into housing, more often than not in private housing rather than in our own stock, which, you know, the ones in most need must come first. So we're working at it. They won't be going away, and it may well get to worse before better.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that, Councillor Batchelor. I suppose to some extent that ties in very much with the previous question in terms of the provision of council housing. And as you're referring to there, as we continue to experience a cost of living crisis within our area, and we know the high costs of living in this area, it's really good to see that the council is continuing to put a high level of focus into supporting vulnerable people related to the requirement for council or social housing and the requirement for supporting homeless people. If I could reference now to page 22 of the report and to SH332, which is the percentage of emergency repairs carried out inside 24 hours. And I note very clearly that for a lengthy period of time now, we have had in the report that 100% of all emergency repairs have been carried out in the 24-hour period, which is set as our target area. I was just wondering if some further explanation can be given of what it is that either cabinet members or officers believe has caused us to be able to have such an incredibly successful provision of services to tenants.
Right, thank you very much for that, Councillor. Eddie Spicer is with us, who is the responsible officer, and I'm sure he wants to say a few words, but perhaps I could actually say first that he's put a huge amount of work into the Mears contract. You remember we're just coming up to the first anniversary of the new contract, and that has been turned around, quite significantly, and to a large extent with the excellent work that Eddie is doing with his team, with the Mears people. So perhaps if it's all right, you Chair, I'd let Eddie say a few words on that.
Please do. Eddie Spicer.
There we go. More words, yeah? Yeah, there we are. Evening everybody. The main difference is on the emergencies. With the new contract that we started in October last year, we made some drastic changes to the emergency provision. In the previous contract, we used to treat emergencies as respond within 24 hours, and there was quite a long list of sort of areas that would be covered as an emergency. Under the new contract, the emergency response time has been reduced to 4 hours instead of 24. But on top of that, the list of what is constituted as an emergency, the list of jobs is also reduced. But we also have a one-day response for what would be classed as sort of urgent but non-emergency works. And as a result of that, within the contract, there's been a slight reprofiling of operatives and responses, and we've split the area or the district into areas so that we can respond a lot faster, sort of 24 hours a day, which has shown its benefits by maintaining that sort of 100% 4-hour reaction time since we implemented the new contract.
Okay, great, thank you. That's really good to hear, because obviously the new Mears contract came through scrutiny and overview as well as other committees, and we talked about the success of that, and I hope we kind of drilled down on that. I'm struck by the answer there you give related to, perhaps as you said, the reprofiling of what's emergency. If I look back up on page 21, AH204, which is percentage of tenants satisfied with responsive repairs, I could be wrong on this, but it strikes me that it may well be then related to what you're talking there. So obviously we can see that at one point over the last year or so, that has gone below target for a period of time, below into the intervention area, but clearly work has done. So in a sense, what it strikes me as, I suppose, is that it is excellent to see that when tenants are obviously very concerned about something that needs emergency response, that they are receiving that response, as you've said there, within 4 hours, that some responses are then profiled to be urgent rather than emergency, but as you said, it refers to a day's response. But obviously, as I'm sure you're doing, as I'm sure the team are doing, the the percentage of tenants satisfied with responsive repairs clearly remains something that you are working on and continues to need to be worked on, because obviously it would be lovely to see that one above the percentage target. It is not significantly below, but it may be that we return to that at some point. My final one to go to, please, is on page 25, which is ES418. And ES418 is the percentage of household waste sent for reuse, recycling and composting year to date. And I just wanted to flag the fact that looking at the data over a period of time, obviously once we go past the dip and the problems related to the pandemic, it seems very much to be the case that there is a particular spike upwards at some point within each part of the cycle, and that when that upward point is reached, there is then a decline. Now, obviously, the trend overall, if I was to put a trend line on this graph, I think I'll be fairly safe in saying is still upwards, it's still moving in the right direction. But if I look at the last 7 data points, I can see that 5 data points ago, it hit what was a peak at that point, which was the highest level that had been hit at all. But we have then seen a slight decline and tailing off over the last 4 months. And if I then go back to, I suppose, roughly halfway between 2022 and 23, again, there was a peak and a slight decline. So I just wonder what is learned by the Waste Service in this regard as to why this may be happening, in that we seem to go up. And it's not a case of saying it's a disaster, because we still remain at a higher point, but I'm just thinking in terms of the idea of looking at the way that data tells us what success is being achieved. I wonder if there's any learning going on and any thought of explanation of how it is we end up with a peak, followed by a gentle tailing off before I'm sure there will be another peak.
Lovely. I'll come to Bridget Smith in the first instance.
I think Councillor Batchelor and Baudet are far better placed.
Councillor Batchelor has left the meeting, so we'll go to Baudet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. Indeed, there is a pattern, and the pattern really is because this indicator is made up of 2 parts. Recycling, which is generally fairly constant most of the year through, although we do see recycling increasing quite a lot in December due to Christmas packaging. Then the second component is composting, which is the green waste. So the peak that we see is absolutely linked to the summer months, when people are doing quite a lot more gardening. Now that shifts a bit before and a bit afterwards, depending on the weather. So sometimes we don't get that peak till about August, September. Sometimes it lasts longer. Sometimes it just depends on the weather. And of course, when we have a lot of rain, then that's delayed as well. So this parameter is really best looked at as a yearly figure. That's when all the seasonalities have been evened out. But the quarterly reviews give us an early indication of where we may need to focus. But to answer our question, the peaks and troughs is purely due to weather, and it's mostly linked to the composting element, which is based on the green waste we collect.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I suppose my main thought in relation to the graph is there is clearly a continuing upward trend for which we should be very pleased. I know it was raised at a previous scrutiny overview meeting regarding the possibility of the level of recycling, and we talked about how actually the level of recycling for the South Cambs District Council was in the upper quartile of things across the country as a whole, and we recognise that situation. I'm pleased to see that things continue to go forward. I just wanted to make a general point in terms of question, which Councillor Smith can pick up on if she wishes to. The data related to call centre times seems to be going in the right direction, Councillor Smith, and seems to be improving. I just wondered if you had a general point you wish to make in response to that.
Absolutely. So an awful lot of work has gone into this, both from Jeff Membry and from Anne Ainsworth. I was going to try and talk to the call centre staff whenever I can. They have real pride in what they do. It's really, do, if you have time, do go and chat to them, because they very much realise they are for some people, they're the only point of contact with the council. So I think we're doing extremely well. And if we refer back to the mystery shopper piece of work we're doing, we are outstripping the vast majority of other councils in our performance there. So yeah, very, very pleased with what's being achieved. It's been hard work. It's been hard work. And it continues to be hard work, but it's very important. It's our shop window, for a lot of people. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Lovely. I've got Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Bygott. So Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. Councillor Drew, your microphone's still on. You probably can't
Thank
see behind
you.
your laptop. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about, on page 22, it's AH245, which is the percentage of South Cambs homes with active HHRS category 1 or 2 damp and mould cases. So firstly, I wanted to thank the officers for doing the survey that you're doing on the stock condition of our housing, which is really important, and for taking action that has reduced that proportion of houses down from the figure in June to the figure in green in September. And also, obviously, there are problems where it's not possible to get into the properties, and I'm sure your officers are doing their best to gain access and sort out the situation there. So, sort of two related questions. One is, I'm wondering if that is related to the work that our officers are doing with hoarding in properties, and that because that might be a reason why properties are damp, and if it's related to the same sort of behavioural concerns that we might have about what's happening in our housing stock. And also, I'm very pleased that welfare visits are being arranged. But the second thing I wondered is if I imagine that some of the properties that we've identified a problem with damp, we might identify that there's a problem that we don't think that stock is good enough for us as a county council to own. And I'm just concerned that I'm just wondering if there is a sequential uptick in concerns in the private rented sector, because landlords might buy these properties from us and not take as much care as we have done. And so I just wondered if there's any follow-up through our contact with the district council, because we have a general responsibility for the quality of housing stock in the area. So I wondered if there's anything you could help.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Councillor Batchelor. We have two new strategies. This is a national priority as well as a local priority. We have two new strategies to do with mould in council housing and in private rental. Is Councillor John Batchelor still there? Does he want?
I don't think he is, but
you're on your own.
Okay, fine. So it's an absolute priority, and I personally treat it as, when I get notification of a home with mould, as I did in the last few days, I certainly treat it as an emergency. There's been one too many tragedies nationally on this, and so yes, so it is dealt with all speed by the council.
brilliant. Thank you. Do you want to come back on that at all, Councillor
It's
Bradley?
just whether we're actively following up on the private rented sector.
We are. We now have a strategy in place for doing so. So we do.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move over to Councillor Bygott.
Thank you, Chairman. So just really an observation to further Councillor Drew's point about ES 418, and you mentioned there trying to identify the trend from that graph. So just a bit of a suggestion really as a professional statistician is that if you do seasonal adjustment on that, which involves taking a moving average of the 12 most recent monthly figures, then that actually will separate out the trend, and it wouldn't make, I think, the results easier to interpret. And I would also say that ES 414 and ES 412, which are just above, the actuals and the targets and interventions are all in a cumulative format. Those are two new KPIs, but if once you have 12 months of data for them, you do a similar moving average process for those, that would actually make the report much easier to see what the trend is. Thank you.
I think that's more comments to be noted rather than a question. Yeah? Did you want? Yes. Yeah. Lovely. Okay, I'll come over to Councillor Stobart.
Chair, I'll be brief, and it's more a comment than a question.
Okay.
I was very pleased that the leader mentioned rural exception sites, and I was just looking on the website. The map there hasn't been updated since 2021. Just that underlines the thing about rural exception sites being a rather dormant topic, but suddenly it's become exciting again. But I just wanted to underline the significance in the sense of the rural exception site being, in a sense, very closely associated with a community, perhaps at the parish level. Parish council has to work with a landowner and the planning authority. And often there's a cultural aspect to it. Do we want extra people in our village? And what's it going to be like? How do we get that mix of housing in an exception site that really meets the local needs? So rather than delve into this now, I wondered if it's something that we as Scrutiny and Overview could come back to. Why was there a dormant period? Is it something about our communication strategy? Are we not reaching the right people? Or are some parish councils not wanting to get involved? Are there questions like that we could help expose and then seek a resolution?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to come in on that, Councillor Bridget Smith?
Yes, and the joy of exception sites is that it's locally led. So people get exactly what they want, and they get affordable homes that are for the local people. So it's very much they lead they lead based on the need. The bottom line is though that it needs an altruistic landowner who's willing to. So again, meetings I've just been in this afternoon, we're talking about land values upwards of sort of £500,000 an acre. For not terribly exciting space, and these people are giving up their land for £10,000–15,000 per plot. So they're taking they have to be truly altruistic about it. Kirsten Donaldson's team do a superb job leading with this, and I think are very, very engaged. So it might be an idea to have a chat to her to see what added value Scrutiny could add to the work that she does. Thank you.
Do you want to come in on that point, Councillor Bradman?
Thank you. I just want to point out that they're not always community-led. Sometimes developers can propose an exception site which has not been agreed with the local community. So it's ideally, yes, altruistic, but not always.
I think what... Yeah,
well, I mean, I think they need community involvement, don't they?
Yeah,
and I think virtually community approval, actually.
And my understanding is that developers can come forward and then it's driven by the parish councils and local community to take that forward. But do you want to just clarify that, Stephen?
Would just the policy requires a local needs assessment to be done with the parish, and that in a sense then is the catalyst for working with the parish council and those communities and landowners to identify the optimum site. And there is a requirement to evidence that process has taken place. It isn't just a developer-led process.
So I think coming back to your point, Councillor Brand, it's really important that communities know that they should be locally driven, even if developers are coming forward with proposals, they should be driven by the community. So I think, yeah, you're right. Councillor Khan?
Recently, the government has withdrawn the proposal that you would have to have a minimum energy quality standards for rented housing. At least it's talking about abandoning the C standard for rented housing. How does that affect our programme? I suspect it doesn't, but I just wanted to check that. And how does it affect our work with private housing? Are we proposing anything to replace it in terms of in our work?
I'm going to have to pass that one on because that's far too much detail for me.
Stephen Kelly, yeah.
Sorry, can you just repeat it?
Yeah. I'm not talking about new housing in particular. I'm not talking about new housing in particular. I'm talking about housing generally, the private rental stock, and in also our council housing stock, where we have an obligation. There was supposed to be an obligation to achieve a standard C under the energy performance certificates on all rental properties. And the government has now said that it's not going to push that one forward. So I want to know how it affected our programme, which I suspect it doesn't, because that's our own incentive. but also how it affects our work with private housing and the quality of private housing and our work on that sense. Is there any replacement to ensure that we also achieve a higher standard in private housing?
Right, so obviously we have a massive programme of upgrading our own housing stock to make it energy efficient. And that's an ongoing rolling programme that, you know, is proven to be very successful. What our responsibility is for monitoring or enforcement of private rental stock to make sure that it achieves those energy standards, I do not know. And unless anybody else in here does know, I'm going to have to come back to you on that one. Which I think we're going to come back to you on that one.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah, we'll move on.
Right. Come back to you on it.
Yeah, I think we can come. Yeah, lovely. Thank you for that, Councillor Khan.
That's a lot.
Lovely. If there's no more speakers, if we refer to page 11 of the agenda, so under item 3, recommendations, I think, is the committee satisfied that we've made comments across the two Appendix A and B on the report? Are we happy that we've done that? Yeah? Agreed. Okay, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the health and wellbeing strategy, refresh 24 to 28, which is pages 57 to 82. Who would like to start on this item? Councillor Ellington.
Thank you. I think this health and wellbeing strategy is really, really well thought out and presents some really good ideas and a really good way forward. But I have one major issue with it, and that is that it doesn't include any transportation. It doesn't mention the fact that if people can't get out of their homes, they have no means of transport within our villages, and therefore they can't socialise. Loneliness is a big issue. Getting help is a big issue. Getting food is a big issue. Then it does not, it's really the thing that underpins the whole of the health and wellbeing strategy, in my view. And I think it really ought to be included in some way within this document.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I don't know if Councillor Bill Handley, I thought I saw him pop up briefly. He's sitting in front of you. Oh, well, he's in front of me. I'm looking on the screen. Bill, hello. It's your long day to see how tired I am.
Yeah.
I was looking at you on the screen there going, oh, that's Bill. Sorry, Bill.
It's all right. Chair, as we all know...
It's been a very long day.
As we all know, transportation is a huge issue across the piece. I mean, we do work with communities on local transport services, and some of those things that we do are shown in Appendix B. There are limits to what we can do as a district council. We have to work in partnership. To some extent, we are beholden on private companies. It's a really difficult one. I'm not sure whether we can do much in here, apart from make mention that it is a problem. I would welcome any ideas that Councillor Ellington has, really.
Councillor
That
Ellington.
shifts nicely. Well, I have this idea that if only we could have a mobile phone in each village with a volunteer and a group of volunteers who are willing to receive a phone call that says, it's a nice day, I've got up and I feel well, and I'd like to go and visit my sister, who's only perhaps half a mile down the road, but I can't get to see her. And that person with the mobile phone would be able to jump in their car or make an arrangement to do so in an hour, perhaps, or whatever, and deal with that issue. And it seems to me a very simple way of moving forward. And I'm sure there are a large number of volunteers who would be willing to give up one day a week when you could offer that sort of service in our villages. And I just pose this idea.
Councillor Bill Handley.
It is an interesting idea. I mean, we do have community transport, of course. There's Owls and others across the district, but it's patchy. I think part of the problem we've had, I mean, through the pandemic, quite a few people who used to do community transport driving stopped doing it and have never come back to it. So I think that a community scheme like that, it's the sort of thing we can do. And I'm going to look across to see if there's anything that's already in the system.
Yeah, so we do raise it as an issue on page 69. It is bulleted that the district is poorly served by public transport. We do offer grants through our service support grant to address public transport, and we currently invest in Dial-A-Ride, Royston Community Transport, and then volunteer car schemes, which are led by Care Network, and we have about 20 volunteer car schemes across the district, which serve approximately 60 of our parishes. The kind of idea that you've just mentioned, Councillor Ellington, is a really good idea, and there is something that exists like that in Cambourne, where there's a WhatsApp group that people can join, and someone can say, I'm going into Cambridge City to do some shopping, does anybody want anything, or does anyone want to join me? And then people have the option to join that. So that is something that we could pose to other communities as an idea. And I do know that Care Network are also working really hard with those parishes that aren't currently served by a voluntary car scheme to try and recruit more volunteers so that we can expand that coverage to those communities that don't currently have a scheme.
Yes.
Just very briefly to add to that point, again, I think it's a really nice idea. I know the community I live in, South Cambridgeshire, that kind of informal arrangement already exists. So I think that does happen in lots of communities that informally. I think Councillor Handy, perfectly put that the more formal community transport schemes have really struggled with drivers, and I think that they would really value our support, which we try and do to rally further drivers through those schemes. Obviously for the council in regards to our involvement with the schemes, so we need to be a bit careful around some of the safeguarding aspects around the formality or informality of schemes, and obviously communities can do their own thing. I can see in my village that they're very popular. For example, they're in Cambourne, but I think we might just need to think about that a bit more in the round in regards to the difference between community transport and something that's perhaps less formal, which might be at a village level.
Thanks so much. Do you want to come back on that, Sue?
Well, yes, it certainly happens in Lulworth, which if you haven't got a car in Lulworth, you don't go anywhere. The community transport scheme does do a good job, but you've got to book it weeks sometimes in advance. It's usually only used for medical appointments and those sort of things. And I have an enormous amount of respect for those people. They do a great job, but it's this impromptu, I really would like to do something today. I feel well enough today. I didn't feel well enough yesterday and I won't feel well enough tomorrow, but today I'd like to do something. And it's those sort of things that I think we could encourage.
Okay, so we'll move on. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I just wanted to reinforce what Gareth has said, that you know, formal schemes are struggling for drivers. In Land Beach and Water Beach, we have the beach drivers, the volunteer drivers scheme, and I know that they always have more requests for lifts to and from places than they have drivers available, and that is on a rota. It also requires somebody to manage that rota between the people calling in and the people who are available to drive. But also, as Gareth has said, it requires safeguarding confirmations, as it were. So the other thing I'm aware of is that some of the people who are perhaps more available to, or might be more available to drive, might be the people who are no longer working. But actually there is an issue that you also need to have a degree of strength, because quite a lot of the people who want to have a lift may also have a wheelchair or a walking frame. And so there is an awareness that there's a need to have a certain amount of space in your car and the strength to assist with that. So it's not an easy problem to solve.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bradnam. I think those comments will be taken on board. I know they're very true for my village as well in Fulbourn, with the community car share schemes, bus, etc. that the parish provide. Councillor Khan.
It's a simple point, because I know a number of these community schemes use minibuses and have a communal minibus. And I just wanted to highlight something, a problem which I think will be coming in the future, is the sense that many people of my sort of age who took their test had passed the test which gave you the right to drive a minibus. Yeah. And then the driving test changed, and you only got normally, you didn't have the right to drive a minibus after you passed a normal test. And we'll be coming to an age when people coming into the age where they're going to volunteer are not going to have the ability to. Another problem is that when you reach the age 70, you need to have a medical certificate if you want to drive a minibus. And I know that when it came up, I had the right, and I didn't renew it because I had to didn't want to pay for £50 a year to have a medical certificate each year. Now, these are problems which will arise, and we do need to think about how you might manage them. Just a comment.
Councillor Bill Handley, grants from the council, maybe?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I think the point's been taken. We already provide money through the service support grant, as Leslie has just explained. We will discuss it within the communities team and see what we can do, but I don't think it's as simple. I'm sure it's not as simple as it might appear.
Agreed. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So I've got some general comments, perhaps to start with, or a general question, and then some more specific ones. So let's see how we get on with the general one. As Councillor, I would agree with Councillor Ellington that this is a fine piece of work. There's the tables at the end, cover a very wide range of services and reflect a concern for the community. So I think it looks very balanced. I was just reflecting on the work of the Young People Task and Finish group, and perhaps this is my first question then, is how is the young people's voice taken into account in the way the programme is formulated? So there is, of course, in section 1, a priority area, and I think that's very topical. But connecting with national trends, for example, and we know about rates of depression in young people, absences from GCSE programmes and so on, that things run quite deep. And then balancing that, there is the scope of the district council to do stuff which isn't universal and is quite specific. So I just wanted to ask that question, perhaps the first one, how is the young people's voice taken into account and how national trends addressed?
Should we take that one first?
Yeah, go on.
Councillor Bill
I'm
Handley.
rambling a bit.
Yeah, well, the work that's going on at the moment with children and young people is shown in Appendix B of this document, which I'm sure you've already seen. We constantly review this. It's fair to say. Leslie, can I invite you to, because I think you're very close to this particular matter.
Well, so first and foremost, thank you very much. The aim of the strategy was to align our goals with those with the integrated care system, and so their first goal was to, or is to, prepare children to enter and exit education prepared for the next stage of their lives. As a result of that strategy, we understand that there was a lot of engagement with young people to develop the goal that they reached. In terms of what we're doing, again, we can do more. If I use the nature-based programs as an example, we get feedback from each of those young people that attend our courses to understand what they got from them, and then how they could be improved, how we could make them better so that they can get more out of them. And so it's a kind of feedback process that we use. And it's the same with we offer children's school holiday schemes and disability schemes. And again, through the course of providing those, we use their feedback to ensure that we can, so it's an iterative, ongoing process that we learn from what we've done the last time to continuously try to improve those programs.
And we're always willing to listen to ideas, Richard.
Sorry, Councillor Stobart, do you want to come back on your
No, that provides really, clear view of the context of this. Frameworks and context are actually vital to deliver results. So thank you very much. Could I ask a second and more specific one? And that's, I think, takes us to agenda page 77. Is the kind of particularly mental health support that might be offered through the community development team in the strategic sites. I know we talked quite a lot about community development last time, but specifically mental health support, as is touched on page 77. Could I ask for some kind of specifics around what we do?
Councillor Bill Handley?
Sure, I can give too many specifics at this point. We are still working with the ICS. To my mind, things are a pretty early stage, really. We have to work with them. We talk to them as to how we can deliver. Think about the way we work as delivering the package at the local level, working with the community. But the programme that we have now is the Appendix B. But yeah, we are here to deliver the work that the network wishes to be delivered. I don't know if, again, Leslie's got anything to add.
Yeah, again, I think we take a lot of learning from Camborne and now Northstowe, and we know that early infrastructure of community buildings is paramount to bringing people, those early trailblazers and new people together, so they've got somewhere to meet and socialise. We recruit community development workers, so that their role is to meet and greet, introduce that, and help to make those connections. And in addition to that, we're working with new residents to understand what kind of groups, what their interests are, to create those groups, again, to formulate those social connections. So there is a lot of ongoing work just to help establish those communities. And then in addition to that, I think we work very closely with our colleagues at County Council, and through Section 106 agreements, there's a lot of external agencies there to support those new residents. So there's a lot of joined up work going on.
Thanks very much. Councillor Stobart.
That's fine, and I think I'll leave it there, those two points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Councillor Drew.
Thank you. I may be asking this question of Councillor Smith, since I'm going to quote her words, but Councillor Hanley, feel free to chip in first if you wish to. On page 64 of the report, we have the foreword from Councillor Smith, and in the second paragraph, it says, "It is the district councils that can stop things going wrong. We have huge influence on public health and preventative services through our teams in housing, planning, economic development, welfare, leisure and environmental health. We take every opportunity to tackle the root cause of poor health to reduce the burden on the NHS and the social care system. Some things we can do alone and much else we must do in partnership with both the statutory and voluntary sectors." I think these are great words and they are a very clear kind of statement of what we want to achieve as a council. And I was wondering, Councillor Smith, if you could talk to us about how you feel that the council as a whole, possibly beyond even the specific strategy we're looking at, but in relation to it, seeks to deliver against the aspiration that you put in that paragraph.
Thank you. That's a very useful question. So I think the reality is we can always do more. I think I do a lot of work on this at the LJ, particularly with the District Council Network, and we commissioned some work recently by the King's Fund that has been very well received about what the role of district councils as a whole is in ensuring good health. And we can do it in many ways. And it goes very unrecognised. To optimise it, it demands really good partnership working between the new integrated care services, between the county councils, between all players really. But through things like planning is probably one of the key ones, through providing places that are conducive to good health. So if we look at Northstowe, Northstowe started off as a Healthy Towns initiative, somewhere where you can walk freely and safely, where there's great open spaces, where cycling is desirable, not just possible, where people breathe clean air, and where they can be segregated from cars and so on, where houses are built to high standards, high qualities. Those all play into the determinants of health. So I think our planning role is probably one of the biggest tools in our box, really. But when we look at our own housing stock, by making sure that our housing stock is mould-free, most certainly, but warm and safe, that we create communities there. We know we have wardens still responsible for our sheltered housing stock. These are all things that play into securing good physical and mental health. Given more money, we will always do more. And we talked much earlier about the Wild Minds scheme. We'd love to do more of that sort of thing. But I think we're very lucky in this area. One of the positive outcomes of the pandemic was that suddenly we were talking to the health service. Now, I'd never spoken before that to anyone in the health service, and suddenly I was in weekly meetings with these people, and we built really positive relationships, and we continue to talk to them. And so, they are now passporting money down to us that allows us to do things like the mobile warden schemes. Again, vitally important in keeping people safe and happy and well in their own homes, and stopping them going into care homes where actually, there's only kind of one outcome at the end of that, and good as some of them are, most people want to be in their own homes and in their own communities as well. So I think what we should be doing is building on the strength of these partnerships to give people confidence and trust in our ability to do more in securing determinants of good health, and thereby relieving pressure on adult social care, certainly on the health service, which are two falling over systems at the moment. But if we have the freedom to do our bit much better, then hopefully we make things better for them as well, so they can be dealing with truly sick people rather than providing beds for people with nowhere to go. So thank you for that question.
And thank you for your comprehensive answer.
Councillor Khan.
It tends to concentrate on the older people and elderly people, and I see that a priority in the initial Cambridgeshire study was that it concentrated on people over 75, but actually it was quite a problem in recent years with younger people for a couple of reasons. In particular, one is that people don't leave home as early. You have far more people, young children people living at home into their late 20s, which when I left home when I was 21, and that was not, I'd left home, but I left permanently from 21, and became a householder at 21. Nowadays, that's just not imaginable. People can't, both the cost of housing and the constraints that people are staying at home, and this produces isolation from other young people and creates problems. I just wondered if you've thought about that in terms of your programme and how we might, what we could do about that.
I'd like to just defer to Councillor Handley, who's responsible first, but I'm very happy to come in after Councillor Handley about why we prioritise, the older age range on this.
Basically, because they normally are the people that need the most help. Actually, the priorities are set. I'm looking over at Leslie again because she's very, very close to this. The priorities are set not by us. And we have to work within a structure.
So if I could just come in, but I think we have to be aware of emerging health threats to young people in particular. And one of those is vaping. So vaping?
Yep.
So I have a very close friend who is a health practitioner. She is seeing children nearly every day of the week with serious lung conditions because they're vaping, and a lot of these children are under 10 years of age. So, we have very good communication networks. We always try and utilise those to get out kind of public health messages. And again, we need to be working closely with our partners to make sure that we address something that is going to become a really, really big problem, and we're going to see some tragedies as a result of it. On top of which, we're the Waste Authority dealing with all these wretched, horrible bits of plastic and nasty batteries and so on, which are a health threat in their own right. So I think, that's why these documents are never static, are they? They're under constant review because things, God, we just had a pandemic, we're having to constantly respond to new stuff that's arising. But, older people need to be our priority because actually they arguably need us more at the moment. Is that fair? Okay.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this item?
Following on from that, there are some excellent initiatives in this. Priority to create environments to give people the opportunities to be as healthy as they can be. And I'm just really struggling a little bit as to the communications that we've got with our residents and how that works, because some of these initiatives, unless you go to a doctor's surgery and you look at the posters, and most people don't go to doctor's surgeries these days, they have a phone call. How do we get this message across to the people who could benefit from it, but actually aren't in the loop? If they're not elderly, they haven't got a long-term health condition, they haven't got a mental health problem, but they might benefit from this. And I'm just wondering where we go with that, because these messages, I don't think, are getting across particularly well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bill Handley.
I'm slightly surprised to hear that, because I think the amount of communications we put out on these things, both social media, and probably most importantly in the magazine, the South Cambs magazine, that's where most of the information is transmitted. I don't like to say it, but I think I don't agree with you on that. I think actually we do as well as we can do to get the message out. We frequently speak with the parish councils, for example, and encourage them to put the information further into their communities. It's never going to be perfect, that's for sure, but I think we do a pretty good job, actually.
Councillor Libby L.
You're absolutely right, it's in South Cambs magazine. What I worry about is that we put things in writing. That's a very passive form of communication with our residents. It's there, but I'm wondering how that's coming back particularly from the GP practices, the PCNs, and how we actually make sure that that's happening. You know, it needs to be slightly more active. People need to be.
Councillor Bill Handley in the first instance.
Can I defer to Leslie because she's clearly has something to tell us.
So thank you, Councillor Hill. We meet regularly now with the PCNs, and there are health and wellbeing groups within those PCNs. So we meet with the social prescribers. I mean, historically, we've had difficulty because I think in the past we were reliant on GPs transmitting this information to their patients, which was never a good idea because they have so much information coming at them. But now that we're working with the social prescribers, that is another route to make our residents aware of the breadth of services that we offer. And we're also going to be utilising the community hubs as they build and expand across the district. So we've got 12 existing from the warm hubs that we had last year, and we're going to be growing those to about 20. And in addition to the community hubs, we'll be recruiting village agents. So Cambridgeshire Acre will recruit those. And those village agents, part of their role will be not to just support the volunteers that are running the community hubs, but they'll be liaising with those groups and trying to work with those residents in the communities that don't normally reach out for support. So that part of their role will be to try and draw them into the community hub and understand what the needs are of that particular community and then match them to the services that are out there. So we see these community hubs as being able to offer outreach services to those that wouldn't normally reach out or make contact. So you know, we're just trying to expand that reach.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So I'd just like to add that, you know, it's not all down to us. You know, it's up to communities as well. So if I think about 3 initiatives in my own village, we have the food hub, which recycles food that would have gone into landfill, run by the two churches, so they do all the promotion on that. We have the warm hub, which we provided the funding for through the ICS, and that's run by the Eco Hub in Gamlingay, and they do the promotion of that. And then we have the gym, which Gareth probably dreams about the Gamlingay gym actually, because he invested so much time in that, and we've invested, you know, substantial money in it as well. And that's run by a community group who do the promotion of that. So, you know, you know, our job is very often to trigger stuff, to facilitate it, but then it's for others to run with it. And I'm seeing that happen really successfully in my own village.
Thank you. That's actually very encouraging. So I think this kind of active promotion is much more useful than perhaps, dare I say, putting out newsletters, because that information doesn't actually register quite a lot of the time. And if there's nothing going on in your particular community or not very much, then it doesn't really mean that much.
Thanks very much, Councillor Earl. Judith Rippeth. Yeah, thank you.
This is really like a bit of a shout out for social prescribers. There's one which a newish one at Waterbeach Surgery who is brilliant, and that I think is one of the connections which really helps with the mobile warden scheme, because often it's the kind of persuading people that maybe that would be helpful for them. And I'm, you know, pleased. I was also pleased to read in this agenda about the kind of increase or the continued funding of those schemes. I think that would be so important to maintain that so they can grow and help more people. But social prescribers, when you get a good one, they are really, really good.
Councillor Bill Hanley, do you want to comment on that at all?
No need to say thank you for the comment.
Thanks very much. Councillor Stobar.
Chair, thank you. I'll be very brief. You know, we've talked about a whole diversity of different activities, but I just wanted to note one while I have a moment. I did note somewhat sadly, you know, while looking at some data for this, that one of the most vulnerable groups for depression is men in the 55 to 60 age group. And it's not a group we often talk about, but actually there's been a lot of success in the so-called Men's Shed initiative. You know, guys hanging out, making stuff, I suppose, reminiscing about the 1960s and things like that. But actually, a particular outreach like that is, as the leader says, very much community driven. You know, you put it all together. But there is an associated thing which has actually been very successful elsewhere, the so-called makerspace. We haven't ever talked much about makerspace in South Cambs, but it is a feature of a number of urban developments. So where you create a space where people go to make stuff. And it's very popular with the young because they can take ideas and actually turn them into reality. And that is a therapy as much as anything we've talked about. So I'd like to think we could talk more about makerspaces and men's sheds and where people make stuff. So that's a comment. I'm not expecting.
And I think it touches on what Councillor Smith said about organically growing things in communities and there being other providers for that as well. So I think Councillor Smith has sort of addressed
so it's exactly, you know, men's sheds, love them, exactly the sort of thing we'll provide grants for. You know, I'm sure, you know, exactly, and the makerspace as well. I have a little charity, you know, it's run various initiatives for people with, you know, problems, you know, mental health problems in particular, you know, where, you know, they've done pottery, they've done collage, they've done all sorts of stuff. You know, it goes down a bomb, and it builds relationships. So it's exactly the kind of thing, you know, we're delighted to support, but we can't run it.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Khan.
Simply comment, I don't really know there's much we can do about it, but I'm very concerned about the thing was referred to earlier on about the fact that virtually all contacts with a doctor now is via online. I find in other national health services, normally you have a yearly checkup with a doctor in person, which picks up things which the person concerned may not be aware of, and which will not contact with over online. And we don't even have yearly checkups normally, and we certainly, people can go years. I haven't gone to the doctor for 2 or 3 years now because I'm fed up. I don't want to have an online thing. I want to see the person in person and pick up things which I might not know. The data may show that it is effective dealing with things which we know about, but it won't necessarily it will affect things that we do know about. I don't know whether there's anything we can do, except perhaps in the patient participation groups. But I would like to ensure that we have encouraged that we have a system whereby patients are seen, even if they're not seriously ill, regularly. We don't go too long without. And people are not discouraged from applying to go to the doctor because they're not going to see somebody in person. I mean, I find that affects me, and I'm getting to the age where that should be worrying. And I'm sure it affects lots of other people in my age group. What can we do about it? Can we do anything about it?
So, Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, much as I would love to have a magic wand to do something about it, there's nothing we can do about it other than do our utmost to keep people healthy so they do not need to use the health service which is a national sickness service, that we optimise what we do to keep people healthy. And then we reduce the burden on the health service, which can then hopefully start coping rather better than it is at the moment. But, you know, I think my own practice, I can get an appointment if I really need it. You know, it's not all by telephone, so I think it's patchy.
But the point is you shouldn't have to really need it to feel you really need it before you go.
Only we treated people like cars and had them MOT'd, but, you know, above my pay grade, I'm afraid.
And I think the key thing, I agree with what Councillor Smith has said, but the key thing is to keep feeding back through patient participation groups, because GP services that we see around the district will operate slightly differently, and they do react to patient participation groups' feedback for the GPs that run those practices. So I think that's probably the best way to feed back into those. We've probably got a limited amount of, you know, from a district point of view. So thanks very much. Any other speakers on this issue? I was going to ask some questions around prevention, but Councillor Smith has answered those questions with previous comments. But I will just say, I think, you know, this is a good report, actually, especially some of the comments that Councillor Smith has made in her preamble around prevention through all the different services across the council, and just how important that is via preventing people from using higher level services or becoming unwell. So just you know, credit to the report and the preamble, that it really emphasises that point, really. So I think we can go to, we've got no other speakers, so we will go to say that we have commented on the report and reviewed it for Cabinet. All agreed on that?
Agreed.
Thanks very much. Right. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. Waiting for my computer to catch up a bit. So the next item is item 7, and that is the General Fund Revenue Bids and Savings. That is pages 83 to 92. So have we got any speakers on this at all? Anyone wants to come in? Councillor Stobart?
Thank you, Chair. My computer's catching up, but I think I can remember. So on page 87, I just wanted a general, make an inquiry about this proposed revenue or expenditure item, introduction of a data team, which read at face value I'd warmly welcome, but I wonder if we can have a little expansion on what the data team will be doing and what their objectives might be. What's the justification, if you will?
I think that's a really important question, and one that I also had, you know, how can we justify that post? What data are they collecting, and what will it be used for? So I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance.
Thank you. So yeah, so really important, but the detail is with Anne Ainsworth and not with me. So if I may bring in Anne,
No
please.
problem at all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So anyone who knows me knows that data intelligence analysis is very, very close to my heart. So this is something we've been talking about for a little while. Essentially, what we're looking to do is to create some extra capacity and resource within the council. As you'll be aware, we've got quite a lot of colleagues working in the council who have expertise in data and analysis, etc. But it's spread across different services. And what we need to have is a central function that helps to make the best use of all those skill sets and bring together those colleagues, but also then can focus really on the type of data and the presentation of that data to members that we really want to be able to collect to then help inform our service delivery moving forward. So if I could give you a couple of examples. One example is about looking internally and making sure that we're collecting the right kind of data and information as an organisation, so that we better understand the needs of our residents and our businesses, and therefore we can plan our services moving forward accordingly. And the other part of it is about external data. What's happening in South Cambridgeshire, etc. as a whole. And what is that information telling us? Again, there's a lot of information out there at the moment, but it's being collected by different groups for different purposes. And what we want to be able to make sure moving forward is that we're collecting that data for the purposes of the council and elected members, and we're able to make sure that we can focus that resource, then doing that additional intelligence, analysis, data layering in a way that really helps us move forward for our future planning for services. So that's what this particular additional capacity we're hoping will do.
Councillor Stobart?
May I ask about the profile of the individuals, if they're likely, I don't want to go into the details of job specs and person specs and so on, but what's the likely profile of those individuals?
Anne Ainsworth?
So if I can, there's a few aspects. So the individuals that we will be looking for not only have expertise in some of their systems and software. Power BI is a good example of one that we've been using recently to good effect, but there are others, of course. So we will need people who understand what systems we can use in order to gather the data, but also make it really functional and efficient so that it's not then adding to the human time, but it's actually helping us in terms of driving that service delivery. So having expertise in understanding those systems, having some understanding of what's coming down the line, because I'm sure, as you'll appreciate, this is a constantly moving area of business and there's always new pieces of software, new developments coming online. So people who can understand what that looks like. It will need to link into our digital aspirations, our technological aspirations, which of course Jeff Membry and the transformation team have been driving forward for us. But the final thing I will say is people skills. So often we will find in these type of roles that you can have someone who's a fantastic technical expert, but we also need someone who can work with people, corral and bring together that capacity and resource I was talking about earlier, and really get people excited and enthused about the opportunities here of what we can do. So technical skills, absolutely. People skills as well, very, very keen. We're actually, if we have agreement to this moving forward, we're actually looking already at what the type of job description and person specification needs to be.
Councillor Stobart.
Well, I was thinking kind of, I think Chief Operating Officer has summarised it, but kind of a data scientist role, but a somewhat outgoing data scientist. It's very exciting because I think correct handling of data offers very good value, and I welcome the initiative.
Can I just add to that? The data that we're collecting, is it sort of member driven essentially, that data that we're collecting? Is that driven from members? And can you give me some examples of the type of data that we'll be collecting to then benefit residents as a result of that data?
So I'll have a stab. So when we had the corporate peer review 3 weeks ago now, one of the things that they highlighted was that we needed to be able to use data better. And you can probably say that about every single council in the country. You know, we collect copious amounts of data, but it's what do we do with it? So, you know, I mean, and we, you know, kind of like, well, you know, we've just been through all our KPIs, haven't we? That's data. But Anne's talking about data that's available from elsewhere as well. What it does is it helps us plan. It helps us utilise our resources wisely. It helps us to deliver, dare I say, best value. And you know, we need to optimise it more. And I think by bringing in data from outside, that allows us to be far smarter about how we plan things. So we're certainly not sitting in cabinet going, oh, let's collect data on whatever, because you know that's not our level of expertise. This has got to come from our experts.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything you can add? Because that was probably not a terribly good answer.
Can I just come back on?
Brian's coming in. There's a man who does understand data.
Can I just come back on? So I know this is in relation to the peer review, but is these additional posts also in relation to the 4-day working week at all for data that the government has asked for?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
If I can just confirm, Chair, these posts, we've been talking about these for quite a while. Okay. So this is the opportunity to add them into the budget for future.
And the data collected won't be used for that purpose at all?
The data, certainly that I'm intending these roles to collect is really that layering aspect. So if I could give members an example. In a previous council that I worked in, we had an ongoing issue with youth unemployment. And there was so much funding going into that area from community groups, voluntary groups, the council, etc. But still, we couldn't make that difference for those young people. We were still seeing those numbers maintained. So what I did in our team was bring together a group of people who could begin to layer the data. So we started with the question, what is happening here? And that's, I think, really, really important when it comes to the purposes of data. What is the question that you're trying to answer, and why are you struggling to answer it? And once we started to layer data, so we brought data in from various councils, from various groups, from schools, education providers, businesses, we were able to see very, very clearly what was happening with young people in that city. And then we were able to devise targeted provision. In so doing, we went from one of the worst areas for youth unemployment to one of the best in the country. But it was because we had a question that we needed the layering of the data to be able to help us answer, and then we could target that provision. That's the type of thing that I'm intending these posts to be able to do for us.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Brian Milnes. Did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to bring in an example of the sort of data collection that we want to be able to utilise to improve our evidence-based policy. So the GCP sponsor the Centre for Business Research, and earlier this week, in fact, it was just yesterday morning, we had a representation of the updated data that they collect. And they take data from a whole series of different sources and then build up a picture of our current performance in terms of job growth, unemployment that we've just discussed, and so on. Now, that's a report produced by a partner organisation of our own, but it's not necessarily something that we are using internally back in the council. So it's rather a perverse situation that a data scientist, let's call them, can find that information and then compare and contrast it with the other information from other bodies that are producing similar but not necessarily the same data, because it has our decisions, if we are an evidence-based policy organisation, which I believe we are. It can only improve our service delivery by responding to the actual rather than the assumed facts.
Thank you very much for that input, Councillor Milnes. I rudely interrupted Councillor Stobart, so I should come back to you to see if you've got anything else you wanted to add or come in on.
Chair, thank you for the opportunity. No, I said what I'd intended, and yeah, thank you for the apology.
You've got Peter Fane, then me.
Lovely. Councillor Peter Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question in relation to the turning off of the public switch telephone network, the new digital phone lines. It sounds to me as though that is likely to be outside of our control, imperative for us to respond to. I was initially concerned about the RAG rating, but of course that it relates to the climate impact of that project. And then I was put into some confusion by the comments in the right-hand column there to confirm if this project involves removal of existing hardware. So I'm really just asking for clarification of this item and what this means for us.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
I can't give you a whole lot of details. The RAG rating is because this will generate a load of waste. And, you know, there's a negative climate impact to that waste. It'll be loads of plastic telephones, basically, a couple of which are sitting in my office. So this has been a piece of work that has been in transition for a really long time. And I think it's something that we're having to do, because I think, you know, we're having to move into new technology. But I'm going to have to come back to you on the detail, because it's Jeff Membry who's been leading on this. But I think it's been in the back of my mind that this is just something that has to be done, and it's possibly taken too long to get it done, actually. So, but we'll come back with some more detail on that. But as I say, the red RAG rating is because it generates waste.
Councillor Peter Fane, do you want to come back at all on that?
No, I'm happy to wait for the leader to come back to us on that one.
Lovely. Councillor Libby L.
Just on that subject, I don't know whether it would be an implication for the council or not, but the red button scheme that elderly people have, they have, you know, you have a box and you can press the button and you get help. That does not work on the broadband system. So I'm just wondering if there might be a requirement to produce, or at least look at the equipment that's out there in people's homes, because as I understand it, that either needs adaptation or replacing. Also, we had the system the other night, we've actually had our telephone moved over by Virgin Media onto broadband. We had a broadband outage in my village for 4 hours last week. No landline telephone, completely cut off.
Very important point, Councillor Bridget.
Yeah, it is actually, and I'm just thinking, you know, my mum has a panic button and she regularly rolls on it in the night, which means that I gallop round her house and appear like a spectre in her bedroom when she's sound asleep and I'm having a panic attack myself. Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem, and I think the answer to it is well and truly outside of our control. But it's just something we need to note. Thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor Earl?
Yeah, I think that's just it. It's to note, and I certainly experienced the effects of it. They do put a battery with these new phones so that if you have a power outage, you have your phone for a couple of hours. But of course, if the broadband goes down completely, you're completely cut off. Yeah. It's quite...
I think it's a really important point for us to raise, even if it's sort of out of our remit as such. I think it's really important, as Councillor Smith says, that we raise that, you know, issue as a red flag and a problem. Yeah. Councillor Drew?
Excellent, thank you very much. Can I go to page 87 of the overall report? And I just want to ask some questions about 3 of the lines within this. On the first line, it's climate, environment and waste, and the title is Additional Refuse Team Leader, 50%. And it explains in there that the post is being introduced in order to reduce the overall sort of level of number of people being managed. I'm just wondering if this should be seen as simply being reflective of the overall expansion of the district and the increased amount of waste service that we have to provide. So therefore this extra money that is being spent simply reflects the extra size of the service.
I think the answer is probably yes, but I'm going to ask Bode to just confirm that.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you. I think it's both. So at the moment, we have 4 team leaders, and they manage over 140 refuse drivers and loaders. So each person has 35 people to manage and more than that. So very simply, it's a case of one person managing 35 people has just become very, very challenging. So not only being able to dispatch them in terms of where they're working today, but also any complaints to do with sickness, holiday, any personnel matters. So it's becoming very, very, very difficult. And the number is growing, like you said. So already we're adding more crews, we're adding more drivers and loaders. It's only going to get worse. So really, this is a case of trying to make their life a little bit easier and they can do their job properly. So just trying to spread the load amongst more team leaders.
Great, thank you. I'm drawn to thinking back to the KPIs item we were going on, and obviously we have the really positive data from the Waste Service about ongoing reduced and low levels of staff sickness. And I know we've talked in this committee about making sure that we're protecting our Waste Service operatives in relation to issues such as back injuries and such like. So I'm kind of struck by the answer you've given there, which explains that this is a good practice move to provide the support for our staff in that regard. Excellent, thank you. For the second one, if I can just go to the line that refers to, is the 4th line down, Waste Service Planning Officer, and to ensuring there's sufficient expert input. Is this reflective of the fact that there is particularly new work and more complicated work the Waste Service is doing? Or is it reflective of a decision being made by senior leaders in the team that up to now we perhaps haven't been as effective as we could have been, and therefore the creation of this post will allow us to be better than we have been so far?
So I'm going to have to refer to Bode, but again, I think, you know, we're a growth area. We have, I think, 36 homes already permitted in our current local plan, and most of them on site. You know, building new houses means providing new bins and incorporating new houses and new rounds. So I suspect it's to do with that, but Bodie will give a bit more detail, I'm sure.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And yes, you're right. It's that and also the both comments that Councillor Stephen Drew made. So my planning colleagues earlier tonight mentioned the fact that we have thousands of applications every year. So we're seeing an increased number of developers trying to engage with us early on, which is what we want. So we can make sure that the developments are planned correctly. They're designed as best as possible. Wherever it's possible, we're now trying to default to use underground bins for the larger developments. That takes a lot of engagement, coordination, and liaison with ourselves. And we're just finding that we don't have the resources to make that happen on time, but also to happen effectively, so that whatever is built is then best in terms of operations later on. So this is exactly to address that problem, that we can effectively engage with developers much earlier on, but also ensure that what's being built is being built as best as possible, so that when it comes to operations and collecting the waste from those houses, we don't have challenges. We already have a few challenges because a few things haven't happened the way they should have, because that engagement hasn't been as effective as it can be. So that's what this role is looking to address.
Great, thank you very much. Can I now go to the line that says empty homes officer post? I know that we've referenced this in terms of it being a temporary post for the last 2 years in previous discussions, and I note that here the decision has been made to make this a permanent post. I'm just wondering, starting with Councillor Smith and possibly going on to the officers, if we could just have a short explanation of what it is about the impact of that temporary post which has made the council believe that it is justified in turning into something permanent.
Thank you. Well, bringing empty homes back into use is really important. It's not something you can do that, it's not something that really merits a temporary role, is it? It's something we're going to have to keep on and on doing. I suspect that it's been backfilled by other officers in the past before the temporary role was put into place. And what I'm guessing is that the temporary person has done a really good job and has justified their job becoming a permanent job because they're proving to be effective. And we can provide you with more detail if you
No,
want
that's
it.
absolutely fine.
So,
I'm struck again by the fact that this perhaps referenced back to when we were looking at the KPIs and we were talking about homelessness strategy and we're talking about council houses coming in. So I assume I'd be right in saying it is part of that holistic strategy.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Spot on.
I have 2 more that I wish to refer to specifically. So my next one is the PA team leader. I'm assuming that PA refers to political assistant.
No, it's
there we are.
It's personal assistant. So there are, I think, 5 personal assistants within the organisation now. You'll have had contact with the lovely Glenda, who helps me and does no end of other things as well. So now this is a team. It was deemed advisable that they had a team leader as a point of contact, in order to foster learning, manage them well, and so on. So that's why.
Thank you very much. My apologies for not reading that one properly. I did ask to make sure I was sure.
Political assistants are another matter.
Yeah, and then my last one refers to the, I suppose sort of both together really, but more focusing on the expansion of the cybersecurity team. We've got expansion of the cybersecurity team to reduce the risk. I assume it's the case that a risk assessment has led us to believe that, like many public organisations and private businesses, there is increased risk in relation to this, and therefore actually the £22,000 referred to here, I would assume you would argue was definitely money well spent.
I cannot emphasise strongly enough how vital it is that we are protected against cybersecurity. There have been a number of hits on local authorities in the last 5 years which have cost millions and millions to put right and taken years to put right. So when all the data has been wiped off, or you've had this ransom software, and what I believe is that some councils' insurers have advised paying of the ransom because the consequences and the cost of the council of not paying the ransom and letting the damage be done is really, just so appalling. So there have been a number of conferences which I and Councillor Brian Mills, who I'll bring in now, have participated in, where, you know, you cannot be too careful because the risks are considerable and councils are getting hits every day. So Councillor Mills, sorry, I should have brought you in straight away on that.
That's fine. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Chair. Just one example that was very telling was Copeland District Council, who suffered a cyber attack because they were in close proximity to Seascale, the nuclear power plant, which was the real target. And for something that they were sort of innocent bystanders to, they thought they were a point of entry to that Seascale infrastructure. It's taken them some 5 years to recover from that cyber attack. As Councillor Smith has just alluded to, it's cost them millions, and they are still not fully recovered. So that's a huge impact on their operational capability that took a huge amount to recover from. So it's something that we're acutely aware of, and we need to make sure that we're as well protected as we possibly can be. There are dangers around, for example, zero-day attacks. That's where vulnerabilities are exposed for the first time when an attack occurs. These are very difficult to mitigate against, but we need to make sure that we have backup and recovery facilities that mean we can roll back from such occasions. So it's a very important, and unfortunately it's a growing problem. It's as bad as it's ever been, and it's a constant battle, but we're very, very acutely aware, and our Chief Operating Officer could add something probably quite usefully to that.
Thanks very much, Councillor Milnes, for coming back in there.
I think we've covered it. It's really important.
Very important, very important. I'm just going to come in on a couple of points because it's on the same page, 80, 87. We've got Councillor Fain, I know, I will come to him shortly. So my first was just a question for my own understanding. On the first line where we talk about additional refuge team lead, and then we've got the 50% figure there in brackets, what does the 50% relate to? Is that a 50% of the post, or
Half-time post, I assume.
No.
Oh, it's us and City.
Sorry.
It's us and City. Sorry. Yes,
Correct.
Of course it,
Yes.
Of course it is.
Yes.
Half the person for us, half the person for the city.
Yes.
Yes.
So, and then does the figure then just demonstrate how much we are contributing to that post? So it's half of the salary, essentially, the 25,000.
Yes,
I
I'm
just
just
wanted to
looking at Bodo to
clarify
nod
that,
as
so
well.
I wasn't 100% clear from the...
Sorry?
No, that's fine. And then coming back to the PA role, I think normally we would sort of think that a personal assistant would be reportable to the person they're providing the service for, and I know you have indicated that there are a number of those roles. Is it another layer that is really necessary if they're already reporting to yourself and other senior management?
Okay, so I am not Glenda's line manager, right? Her job is to do everything for me. But that team leader post will be one of our existing PAs. It'll be one of our existing PAs will become the team leader. Okay. It's not the creation of a new role. Do you want to add anything?
If I may, Chair,
yes,
as well,
please.
One of the purposes for having the team leader post is because if a PA is off, for example, on leave, then there needs to be a coordination process by which the work of that individual is covered by the other members of the team. So it is very much about sharing knowledge and being able to do additional training together and development of skills, but it's also a coordination piece to make sure that the work is always covered across the PAs in the council.
Thank you very much. I'll bring in Councillor Fain. Thanks for your patience.
Chair, thank you for coming back to me again. To some extent, my question is a follow-up to that asked by Councillor Drew earlier on the empty homes officer post. I wondered to what extent this post will address the issue of particularly blocks of flats purchased for investment purposes, which may not be occupied, may never have been occupied. Their ownership may be difficult to identify. I was faced at Parish Council last night by an allegation that there are at least one complete block unoccupied, remaining unoccupied after being built in the last 5 years. I haven't had the opportunity to check that, and indeed I don't know how I would. And I just wonder whether this is one of the issues that might be addressed, bearing in mind that the even if there is the penalty of the double council tax, that can be quite small in relation to the potential gain in capital values.
Thank you, Councillor Fain. I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance.
Sorry, I think we're going to have to come back to you. I mean, we don't really have blocks of flats sitting empty in South Cambridgeshire, really. So I don't think it's an issue, but I suspect it's a role that will flex to accommodate whatever the new and emerging need is. What we don't want is homes sitting empty when we have, as we've already heard from Councillor Batchelor, an alarming increase of over 200 in our waiting list, in a single month. So I don't know the detail of your answer, Councillor Fain, but if you'd like to if you could just ping an email to me, just being very specific, then we'll pick that up and we'll attend to it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Have we got any other speakers on this report? No? Okay. In that case, we will come to page 83, and the committee is happy that we've reviewed and considered the report, and those comments will go forward. Agreed? Lovely. Okay, so we'll move on to item 8, the work programme, which is on pages 93 to 104, and it's set out there the agenda items coming up for the next couple of meetings. Has anyone got any questions on the work programme? Obviously, Councillor Drew and myself with officers will be meeting to discuss what is coming forward. I was just going to make a plea for the committee to, if you have got any areas where you want to sort of dig a little bit more deeply or scrutinise, come forward with those, and we will do our best to get those onto the agenda in a relevant time scale. So please do come forward with any of those, and Councillor Stobart made some comments around that last time, which I think were very valid. So please do bring things forward. So if no one's got any comments, we'll move on to the date of the next meeting, which is the 18th of January 24 at 5:30 p.m, which brings us to the close of the meeting. If no one's got any other comments. Thanks very much.